The galaxy had learned fear a long time ago. Not the kind of fear that fades with courage or is silenced by weapons. No, this was the kind that stays forever. A fear written into history books, burned into collective memory, and whispered in warnings to children across 1,000 worlds, across countless species. One absolute truth was shared by all: never, ever go near the dragon. This wasn't a myth. It wasn't a campfire story meant to scare younglings. The dragon was real. It slept inside a broken, shattered star system, a place where light itself bent strangely and time felt wrong. No ships ever stayed long. No signals lasted more than a moment. Even the stars nearby seemed to shine with less conviction, as if they were afraid of being seen. The dragon did not move often. It didn't hunt like other beasts. It didn't need to, because when it woke, civilization simply ended. Entire fleets vanished without leaving so much as a scrap of debris. Planets didn't just explode. They cracked, not from fire, but from an impossible pressure, as if the universe itself was pushing them apart from the inside out. Every species knew its name. Every species knew its power. And every single species agreed on one universal law: leave it alone. That was why the entire galaxy froze when the alarms began to scream. A joint observation fleet, a coalition of the bravest and most careful minds the galaxy had left, hovered at the very edge of the forbidden system. Scientists watched from heavily shielded stations, their instruments flickering nervously. Commanders stood rigid on their bridges, every muscle tensed, ready to retreat at the slightest sign of danger. They weren't there to attack. They weren't there to study it up close. They were only there to confirm that the dragon still slept, a cosmic checkup on a sleeping apocalypse. Then, something went terribly wrong. A small, unassuming human transport ship had drifted too far forward, breaking formation. Panic erupted across the command channels. Voices overlapped in a chorus of dread. Pull back. Who is that? Who authorized that ship to move forward? Lock its engines now. Cut its power. But the transport ship didn't turn. It didn't respond. As the long-range scanners frantically zoomed in, a wave of stunned silence washed over the fleet. There, standing on an open, exposed platform at the very front of the ship, was a human child. No armor. No weapon. No specialized suit built for the dangers of deep space. Just a child. Small. Thin. Wrapped in simple, plain clothing. The child stood at the edge of the platform, staring silently into the swirling darkness where the dragon slept. Commanders shouted orders that couldn't be carried out. Scientists argued furiously over sensor readings. Some begged for permission to fire a warning blast, to nudge the ship back. Others screamed that any sudden energy spike might be the very thing that wakes the monster. But it was already too late. The space ahead of them moved. At first, it looked like a shadow sliding across the distant stars. Then the stars disappeared completely, blotted out by something massive, something immeasurable. Scales, each one as large as a city, slowly materialized from the void. They were ancient, cracked, and glowing faintly with a deep, internal crimson light. The dragon was waking. Its eye opened. A single, colossal eye that shone brighter than a sun but felt colder than the absolute zero of empty space. Across the fleet, energy readings spiked beyond any known limits. Gravity itself began to twist and warp. Ships creaked and groaned as their hulls strained, suddenly feeling as fragile as paper. Every fleet, every ship, froze in place. No one fired. No one even spoke. They all knew this moment. They had seen it in grainy, terrifying historical recordings. This was the moment right before extinction. The dragon's head lifted slowly, each movement bending the fabric of space around it. Its breath rolled out in silent, invisible waves that shook the most powerful shields and silenced every engine. And still, the human child on the platform did not run. The child stepped forward. A soft, deliberate step. Then another. Stop the child, someone screamed into a dead calm channel, their voice cracking with sheer terror. But no ship could move. Fear had locked every system, every pilot, every commander. Even if they could act, what could they possibly do? One stray phaser blast might be enough to wake the dragon fully. One wrong move, and they would doom not just themselves, but countless worlds. The child reached the very end of the platform. Now, between the small human and the dragon, there was nothing but open space and the promise of absolute death. The dragon's immense eye focused. For the first time in millennia, the deadliest dragon ever known, the ender of worlds, truly looked at something small. Its very presence pressed down on reality itself. Time felt thick, slow, like moving through honey. Sounds vanished. Even thoughts became heavy and sluggish in the minds of the onlookers. Then the child raised one small hand. On the bridges of ships light years away, Several crew members from different species simply collapsed in terror. Some squeezed their eyes shut, unable to watch. Others kept their recorders running, knowing this would be the final image their civilization ever saved. The dragon leaned closer. Its breath, a current of cosmic energy, washed over the small platform. The air shimmered. The metal of the ship groaned under the strain. The child's simple clothes fluttered in the unseen wind. Still, the child did not cry. The child did not scream. The child smiled. It wasn't a brave smile. It wasn't a proud or defiant one. It was a simple, innocent smile, the kind a child gives to a familiar face. The dragon paused. Its massive, galaxy-sized body stopped moving. The insane energy spikes on the sensors dropped slightly. That small change alone sent a shockwave of disbelief through the watching fleet. No force, no weapon, no natural phenomenon had ever slowed the dragon before. The child took one more step, right to the precipice. Close enough now. Close enough to touch death itself. The galaxy held its breath. It felt as though every war, every empire, every species that had ever lived, was waiting in that singular, silent moment. The dragon lowered its head, not to attack, not yet. Its movement was slow, inquisitive. The child's hand moved forward, shaking just a little not from fear, but from the simple effort of reaching out. And as the microscopic distance between soft skin and ancient, city-sized scale vanished, every sensor across the fleet went completely wild. Time slowed to a crawl. History waited, and the entire galaxy froze right before the touch that should have ended everything. The dragon did not strike. That single fact shattered every known law of the galaxy. For long, agonizing seconds, nothing moved. The dragon's colossal head hovered impossibly close to the small human child. Its eye, an orb large enough to swallow entire cities, was fixed on the tiny shape before it. Cosmic energy still crackled in the space between them, thick and heavy. But the chaotic surge had stopped. Across the fleet, a wave of confusion replaced pure, unadulterated terror. "This is impossible," a senior historian whispered, his voice trembling over the comms. The dragon never hesitates. Every historical record, every data fragment recovered from scorched star systems, told the same story: instantaneous destruction. Every previous encounter with this entity ended in fire, crushing pressure, and then, an unnerving silence. There were never any warnings, no pauses. No mercy. Yet now, the dragon simply waited. The child's hand remained outstretched, not yet touching the creature. The distance between soft skin and ancient scale was small, but it felt as vast and endless as the void itself. The child's fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strange, heavy weight that saturated the air. The dragon exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath. That single act sent shockwaves across the system. A nearby moon fractured. Deep cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Ships struggled to keep their shields active against the warping gravity. But this time, it felt controlled, as if the dragon was actively holding its immense power in check. The commanders watching understood the terrifying implication. The dragon was making a choice. Across thousands of bridge, screens, ancient files opened. Desperate minds scrambled, searching for any answer, any forgotten legend that could explain this. Some species believed the dragon was a god of destruction. Others called it a doomsday weapon, a relic left behind by a long-dead universe. A few theorized it was a form of living judgment, sent to erase civilizations that grew too proud, too arrogant. But one undeniable truth united every theory. The dragon had ended worlds. Long ago, a mighty empire, blinded by its own power, tried to enslave it. They forged chains from collapsed stars and sent an armada to capture the beast. The dragon simply woke and burned their capital systems until nothing remained but cosmic dust. In another era, a highly advanced civilization tried a different approach. They attempted to communicate, offering tribute, knowledge, and the secrets of the cosmos. The dragon responded by erasing their home sun with a single, deafening roar. No one ever survived these encounters, no one until now. Within the dragon's unfathomably ancient mind, memories stirred. It remembered the fire and the pain of 1,000 wars. It remembered endless, relentless attacks. It remembered being feared, hated, hunted across millennia. Every species that had ever approached it carried weapons, activated shields, and harbored plans to either kill or control it. But this child carried nothing. There was no hidden energy signature, no psychic shield, no trace of hostile intent. The dragon felt something utterly unfamiliar pressing against its mind. It wasn't a threat. It was simply a presence. The child's eyes met the dragon's glowing gaze. They didn't hold fear. They didn't reflect anger. They held a pure, simple wonder that mirrored the swirling nebulae behind them. And the dragon felt that reflection echo deep within itself. For the first time in countless ages, it remembered a time before the war, before stars learned to burn in fear, a time when it was young, and the universe was a wide, quiet, and wondrous place. The child leaned forward just a fraction. A chorus of gasps and frantic shouts erupted across the fleet's command channels. Pull the child back. Now this will trigger an attack. End the feed. No one should see this. But no one moved. No one dared. Because the dragon moved first. Its head lowered, sinking even further. This is it, the watchers thought. Their collective breath held. The killing blow. The end of everything. Instead, the dragon stopped again. Its massive, razor-sharp claw shifted, but not toward the child. It moved away. Slowly, carefully, as if it was terrified of causing even the slightest harm. That single, deliberate movement sent a shockwave of disbelief through the entire fleet. The dragon was being careful. Energy readings plummeted. The swirling cosmic storms around the system began to calm. Stars that had flickered weakly under the pressure began to shine a little brighter. And then, the child touched the dragon. Small, fragile fingers rested against an ancient scale, a surface warm and rough, marked by scars older than human history itself. Nothing exploded. No fire erupted. No scream of annihilation tore through space. The galaxy froze in absolute, stunned silence. The dragon's immense body trembled once. A deep, low sound rolled through the void, not a roar of fury, but something softer, something that sounded broken. The child laughed quietly. That tiny, light sound cut through the heavy silence. Like a blade of hope, the dragon felt it deep inside its core. It remembered being small. It remembered curiosity. It remembered gentleness. The dragon closed its eye. The simple act should have sent fleets scattering in panic. But the eye didn't close in anger. It closed in rest. The child placed their other hand on the dragon's scale, and the connection between them deepened. Something passed between them, not words, not images, but pure feeling. A sense of safety. A sense of peace. Across the fleet, species that had never known peace felt a strange calm wash over them. Weapon systems powered down on their own, their lights dimming. Long-running conflicts and border skirmishes paused, their reasons suddenly forgotten. The dragon wasn't just touching the child, it was listening. Ancient pain, buried for eons, began to surface. Centuries of being attacked, of being feared, of crushing loneliness. The dragon had never chosen to destroy. It had only ever responded to endless, escalating threats. But the child didn't judge. The child simply stayed. And in that moment, the deadliest dragon ever known realized something that would shake the universe more than any battle ever had. It was tired, so incredibly tired. Tired of the fear. Tired of being alone. Tired of ending worlds. The child, feeling the great creature's weariness, leaned against the dragon's scale, resting their head. The dragon did not pull away. Instead, it lowered its massive body ever so slightly, creating a safe, stable platform for the child to stand against. Across the galaxy, historians and philosophers knew this moment would change everything, because the dragon that ended worlds had just chosen not to end this one. And for the first time in history, absolutely no one knew what would happen next. The galaxy held its breath. For the first time in recorded history, the deadliest dragon ever known was silent. Not in sleep, not in rage, but in an impossible stillness. Its colossal body was a mountain range adrift among shattered stars, and against its ancient scales, a human child stood as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. Across the observation fleet, thousands of beings were frozen. Commanders forgot their orders. Scientists stared blankly at their screens, their data meaningless. Warriors who had charged headfirst into black holes without a second thought, now felt their hands tremble. Why? Because the dragon, the destroyer of worlds, had allowed the child's touch to continue. The child leaned their small body fully against the dragon's side. The scales were warm, not burning hot as the legends claimed. They felt alive, a deep, steady thrumming, like a heartbeat older than time itself. The child listened, calm and curious, as if hearing a story told without words. A song sung by the cosmos. And the dragon felt the child, too. It wasn't weight. It wasn't a threat. It was simply a presence. It sensed the small, fragile life so brief, so fleeting, yet so impossibly bright. Humans lived for a blink of an eye compared to the life of a star. Yet this tiny being stood before eternity itself without a shred of fear. The dragon had faced down armies, gods, and the cold void. But it had never known courage like this. Inside its ancient mind, memories shifted like tectonic plates. It saw flashes of the past, not as images, but as raw feelings, endless darkness, unending attacks, the searing pain of being hunted simply for existing. Every species, every empire, had seen the dragon as a weapon to be used or a curse to be eradicated. No one, in all of history, had ever seen it as simply alive. The child did, and that simple, profound truth changed everything. The dragon's long, serpentine tail began to move. It wasn't a motion of aggression. It was slow, deliberate, curling away from nearby debris, forming a protective barrier around the child. Its massive wings, which could blot out suns, folded closer, shielding the small figure from the harmful radiation of the broken stars nearby. Across the fleet, scanners went wild. Technicians struggled to interpret the impossible readings. "The dragon is shielding the child," one scientist whispered, their voice shaking with disbelief. "That's not possible." Another shot back, their own certainty wavering. "It doesn't protect, it destroys. That's all it has ever done." But the data didn't lie. For the first time since the dawn of memory, the great destroyer was protecting something small and fragile. The child lifted their head and looked up, their eyes tracing the patterns on the dragon's hide. One small hand reached out and gently pressed against a deep, gnarled scar on a scale mark left by an ancient superweapon, long since turned to dust. The dragon felt the touch and remembered the agony. A tremor, almost imperceptible, ran through its immense frame. It flinched. The child noticed. With a slow, careful motion, the child moved their hand away from the scarred scale and placed it somewhere smooth and unmarked instead. The message was clear, sent without a single word. "That hurt. I'm sorry." The dragon froze. No being in all of existence had ever cared whether it felt pain. They only cared that it could be hurt, that it could be killed. This simple act of empathy, this acknowledgement of its suffering, was more powerful than any weapon ever fired at it. The bond between them deepened, not through language, but through a shared, silent emotion. The dragon felt a wave of curiosity, warmth, and trust flow from the child, and in return, the child felt a sense of safety that was absolute, vast, and steady, like standing beneath a mountain that would never, ever fall. Time began to warp. Minutes stretched into hours, hours compressed into moments. The fleets remained motionless, their crews watching history rewrite itself before their very eyes. For some species, the primal fear they had always felt for the dragon began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of awe. For others, a different feeling surfaced: shame. They remembered the councils, the votes, the times they had declared humanity a menace too weak, too reckless, too dangerous to be allowed to expand. And now, a single human child stood where no god or warlord had ever survived. The dragon slowly opened one of its eyes again, but only halfway. Its gaze, which could incinerate planets, was soft. The burning, internal light was dimmed. The colossal eye focused not on the fleets, not on their weapons, but on the child, and the child alone. The child smiled. With a grace that defied its size, the dragon lowered its massive head until it rested gently against the broken remains of a shattered planet. The movement sent gravitational waves rippling through space, but it was so careful, so deliberate. Guided by pure instinct, the child climbed slightly higher against the dragon's side, until they stood near its massive eye. One small hand reached out and rested near the dragon's eyelid. The fleets panicked. Voices screamed over comm channels. "That's too close. If the dragon reacts, evacuate the system now." But the dragon did not react with anger. It closed its eye fully. Trust. Pure, unconditional trust. That single, silent act sent a shockwave through every species watching. The destroyer of worlds trusted a human child. Deep within the dragon's ancient mind, something that had been locked away for eons finally broke free. A memory, long sealed behind layers of pain and fury, surfaced. A memory of a time before war, before fear, when the universe was young and quiet. The dragon had not always been a destroyer. It had once been a guardian. That sacred role had been stolen from it through endless battles, betrayed by those it sought to protect. Over millennia of suffering, it had forgotten what it meant to shield, and only remembered how to punish. The child reminded it. A soft sound escaped the dragon's throat. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a growl. It was something gentle, a low, resonant hum. The vibration passed through the child's body like a lullaby, calming and profound. The child sat down, leaning their full weight against the dragon's warm scales, and closed their eyes. And the dragon did not move away. Across the galaxy, something fundamental shifted. Long-range sensors on 1,000 worlds detected sudden, inexplicable changes. Hostile fleets on the brink of war powered down their weapons systems. Old, bitter rivalries paused, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The dragon's presence, once a harbinger of doom, no longer felt like a threat. It felt like balance. Back on the observation fleet, the scientist who had first noticed the shielding whispered to themselves, This changes everything." They were right, because if a human child could stand beside the great destroyer without fear, if they could soothe the rage of a being older than stars, then humanity was not weak. Humanity was something far more dangerous and far more powerful than anyone had ever imagined. They were beings who could walk into the darkest, most terrifying place in the universe and bring not force, but light. The dragon slowly lifted its head again, careful not to disturb the resting child. Its gaze turned outward, toward the silent, watching fleets. The fire was back in its eyes, but it was a different kind of fire now. It was not the fire of mindless rage, but the fire of purpose. The message, sent across the void, was unmistakable and absolute. This one is mine. And for the first time in history, the galaxy finally understood. The deadliest dragon ever known had just chosen a side. Across the silent void of space, a single image spread like wildfire, traveling faster than the fear it inspired. On screens from the galactic core to the outer rim, every major power saw the same impossible sight. A human child, small and fragile, standing beside the deadliest dragon ever known. There was no attack, no fire, no cataclysmic destruction. There was only an impossible, profound calm. Galactic councils convened in a state of sheer panic. Ancient enemies, who had warred for millennia, now sat side by side, their gazes locked on the same shared feed. The image was undeniable. Some voices screamed for immediate action, a preemptive strike against humanity, before they could unleash this cosmic horror. Others, more cautious, argued that any move against the human race would now be an act of suicide. But beneath the raw terror, a deeper emotion simmered, utter confusion. The galaxy had studied humans for centuries. They were a chaotic species, loud, emotional, perpetually divided. They fought endless wars among themselves over trivial matters. They were technologically young, biologically fragile. So how had a single, unassuming human child succeeded where entire battle fleets and planetary bombardments had failed? How had they tamed the untamable? In desperation, scholars and military analysts pried open dusty, ancient archives. They began to re-examine human history, not through the lens of their wars and conflicts, but through their forgotten moments. They looked not at battles, but at stories. And slowly, a bewildering pattern began to emerge. Humans bonded. They formed deep, inexplicable connections with creatures that could kill them in an instant. They domesticated predators on their own homeworld. They didn't abandon their sick and elderly. They cared for them, staying by their side until the end. They consistently reached for the unknown, not with weapons drawn, but with open hands. Even when trembling with fear, the galaxy had made a critical miscalculation. Humans didn't seek to eliminate danger from their lives. They learned to live beside it. They embraced it. The dragon, a being of immense cosmic awareness, felt the galaxy's shift. Its senses stretched far beyond the nearest stars, touching the minds and metal of countless watching fleets. It felt their weapons powering down, not out of mercy, but from a dawning, terrifying realization. Brute force was now irrelevant. The rules of the game had changed. The great beast turned its colossal head, its attention returning to the small being beside it. The child had grown tired. A small, trusting hand rested against a scale larger than the child's entire body. The dragon shifted its immense form, a movement that could have leveled mountains, but it was done with an impossible, practiced gentleness. It lowered itself further, creating a broad, stable platform where the child could safely sit and rest. Carefully, always so carefully, the dragon remembered the last time it had tried to be gentle. That memory was a scar, ending in betrayal and agony. Its trust had been met with adamantium chains and weapons that tore at its soul. That was when it had become the monster the galaxy feared, the destroyer of worlds. But this child had brought no chains, no weapons, only quiet company. The dragon extended its consciousness, not to invade the child's mind, but simply to listen to the whispers within. What it found was disarmingly simple: pure curiosity, unfiltered empathy, a profound sense of belonging that reached outward, not inward. The child didn't see a monster. The child saw someone who was lonely. That simple, innocent truth struck the dragon with more force than any superweapon ever could. Across the watching fleets, the debates raged on. Humans cannot be trusted, one commander argued. They are masters of deception, another warned. This is how empires begin, a wise old counselor murmured, not with a bang, but with a bond. But there was no evidence of control. The humans weren't issuing commands. They weren't posturing or making demands. They were simply standing with it. Finally, a human diplomat's voice cut through the galactic chatter, broadcast on all open channels. Her voice was steady, but anyone watching the visual feed could see her hands trembling slightly. "We did not plan this," she said, her words echoing across 1,000 star systems. "We did not train the child. We did not send her as an envoy with weapons or demands." She paused, as if the next words were the most important she would ever speak. "This is simply who we are." That answer terrified many species far more than any threat of annihilation, because it meant this power, this ability to connect with the most terrifying force in the universe wasn't a weapon they had built. It was a fundamental part of their nature. It was innate. As if to punctuate her statement, the dragon shifted its massive, star-dusted wings. It was a slow, deliberate movement, shielding the small human transport ship that had brought the child's family. The gesture was full of unmistakable meaning, a silent declaration to the entire galaxy. Any attack on humans would now have to go through the dragon. Suddenly, forgotten histories clicked into place. Old records from long-extinct species, previously dismissed as myth, were revisited with new urgency. They all spoke of a species that didn't conquer by force, but by connection. A people who survived not because they were the strongest, but because they held together when everyone else broke apart. Those beings were always feared, and they always changed everything. The child stirred in its sleep. The dragon felt the tiny movement instantly. It adjusted its position again, a minute correction of its immense body, lowering its head to ensure the child wouldn't slip. Its massive eye, a swirling nebula of gold and amber, opened just a crack to watch over the small life resting against it. A guardian, not a destroyer. For the first time in millennia, the dragon felt something it had long forgotten. It felt purpose. The galaxy's reaction was a chaotic wave of hope and fear. Some worlds celebrated this new, unexpected peace. Others frantically prepared their defenses, fearing a new kind of human empire. And some, quietly and cautiously, sent envoys toward human space for the very first time, seeking not to conquer, but to understand. A high-ranking war council of a militant alliance made a final, desperate decision. They would test humanity, not with warships, but with pressure, trade restrictions, border provocations, silent, political manipulation to see if this alliance would fracture. The dragon sensed their hostile intent the moment it was formed. It did not roar. It did not charge. It simply rose. It unfolded its true form, a being so vast that stars dimmed in its shadow, and the fabric of space itself seemed to bend under its presence. The child, however, remained safe, held securely against its warm scales. The dragon turned its gaze toward the distant fleets, where the plot was being hatched. Its voice didn't travel as sound. It traveled as pure, undeniable certainty, a psychic wave that washed over every conspirator. Enough dot. In that single instant, every hostile plan collapsed. Ship systems failed. Commanders found their minds clouded with a primal fear, not a fear the dragon imposed, but one they already possessed, a deep, cellular memory of what this being truly was. They remembered the destroyer it had once been, and trembled before the grace it now chose to show. The dragon lowered itself again, the universe breathing a collective sigh of relief. The child slept on, peaceful and undisturbed. Human ships began to move closer, not to surround or command, but to support. Medical teams stood ready. The child's parents watched from a viewport, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Humanity did not cheer or gloat. They simply waited, patiently, as they always did for their own. And in that moment, the galaxy finally understood. Humans didn't rush to claim power. They accepted responsibility for it. And that, more than any fleet or weapon, made them far more dangerous than any conqueror. The great dragon closed its eye, resting. Beside it, a human child breathed softly. And across the countless stars, the universe began to adjust itself to a new reality. Because humanity had just revealed its greatest, most terrifying strength. Not their weapons, not their fleets, but the simple, profound courage to care when everyone else chose to fear. The galaxy did not attack. That was the most dangerous part. After the dragon chose to stand beside humanity, open war became unthinkable. No fleet, no admiral, no species wanted to be remembered as the one that forced the dragon to wake in anger. So, weapons stayed silent, borders held firm. But fear doesn't always come with blasters and torpedoes. Sometimes, it comes with words whispered in the dark. Galactic councils convened once more, not in grand, public halls, but in private, shadow chambers, their leaders, from every corner of known space, watched the same recordings on an endless loop. The small human child, standing beside the colossal, star-breathing dragon, perfectly calm, completely unafraid. One question echoed in every room, a quiet poison spreading through the highest echelons of power. What happens if this bond grows? The fears were varied, but they all converged on a single point: loss of control. Some worried the dragon, a force of nature once held in awe and terror, would become fully loyal to this young, unpredictable species. Others feared a different kind of conquest, that humans would gain influence over the entire galaxy, without ever firing a single shot, simply by having the dragon on their side. A few, the oldest and wisest among them, feared something far worse, that the universe was changing in a way they could no longer predict, let alone command. They chose another path, not war, but pressure, a soft, insidious force. Official messages began to stream into human-controlled space. They were polite, calm, almost friendly on the surface. They asked for cooperation. They requested scientific studies on the bond. They pleaded for shared responsibility in managing this unprecedented situation. But behind the diplomatic jargon and carefully crafted phrases was a single, unyielding demand: distance. They wanted the child taken away from the dragon. It's not forever, they promised in their transmissions. It's only for balance, they claimed. For the safety of all, they insisted, their words dripping with false concern. Human leaders listened to every message. They did not shout. They did not issue threats or mobilize their fleets. They simply asked one question in return, a question so simple it was disarming. Why the galaxy, for all its ancient wisdom and collective intelligence, did not have a good answer. The dragon felt the tension long before any formal words reached it. It sensed a hesitation in the dance of distant stars, an uncertainty spreading through the cosmos like a creeping cold. The child noticed it too. Humans, for all their supposed flaws, are incredibly good at noticing feelings others try to hide. The child sat quietly near the dragon's immense form, his small hand resting against a scale the size of a shuttlecraft. The dragon lowered its head slightly, its nebula-like eyes focused on the small being beside it. This wasn't a gesture of fear, it was concern. It understood exactly what the galaxy was trying to do. They weren't trying to harm the child, not directly. They were trying to control the situation, to manage the unmanageable. The dragon remembered this tactic well. Ages ago, others had tried the same thing. It never started with chains. It started with rules, with limits, with so-called agreements for the common good. But those paths, the dragon knew, always ended in the same place: pain. And it did not want that again. Slowly, carefully, human ships began to arrive. They didn't come in attack formation. They weren't positioning themselves as guards. They came as family. The child's parents stood nearby, their faces a mixture of love and resolve. Scientists, who a short time ago were clamoring for data, now stayed back, granting the pair a respectful silence. Leaders waited at a distance, their presence a quiet statement of support. The child looked up at the dragon, their small voice cutting through the silent tension of space. "You're worried," the child said softly. The dragon felt the truth of that simple statement resonate deep within its ancient core. The galaxy's pressure grew stronger, more overt. Trade with human systems mysteriously slowed to a crawl. Access to shared hyperspace routes became difficult, bogged down in sudden, inexplicable bureaucracy. The friendly messages stopped, replaced by daily communiques warning of vague but serious consequences if humans refused to cooperate. Still, humanity did not threaten. They did not posture. They simply waited. They were always good at waiting. Finally, the Galactic Council demanded a live address, a universal broadcast. Every major species, from the crystalline entities of the core worlds to the gaseous beings of the outer rim, watched, and the dragon watched too. Its immense presence felt even across light years of empty space. A single human representative, a woman with calm eyes and a steady voice, stood before the galaxy. "We understand your fear," she began, her voice even and clear. "But fear does not grant ownership." She paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 worlds. "The child is not a symbol. They are not a tool, and they are not a bridge for you to control." The galaxy responded with a profound, collective silence. Then, a single question appeared on every channel, a unified demand from the assembled powers. Will the dragon remain neutral? Before the human representative could even begin to formulate a reply, the dragon answered. It used no sound, no words that could be translated. It answered with pure, undeniable certainty. The chaotic swirl of stars around its body steadied. The very fabric of space in its vicinity grew calm, peaceful. The feeling spread outward like a quiet, unstoppable wave, washing over every ship, every station, every planet. The message was simple and absolute. I am not owned. At that moment, the child stood up and stepped forward, placing both small hands flat against the dragon's warm, cosmic scale. I chose to be here, the child said, their voice carrying a strength that defied their size. The galaxy froze again, but this time, it was not from fear. It was from understanding. The bond wasn't a product of human manipulation. It wasn't a strategic advantage they had engineered. It was chosen, freely given. That one fact changed everything. The councils, the leaders, the old powers of the galaxy, all realized something far too late. They had miscalculated catastrophically. If they pushed any harder, if they escalated their threats, they wouldn't break the bond between the child and the dragon. They would only reveal their own desperate need for control. They would reveal themselves as tyrants in the making, and in doing so, they would remind the dragon precisely why it had once burned entire worlds that tried to cage it. The pressure stopped abruptly. The trade routes reopened. The bureaucratic tangles vanished. The threatening messages ceased, replaced by soft, carefully written apologies that were slowly, humbly delivered. The dragon felt the tension in the cosmos recede, and it relaxed. Not fully. An ancient being never relaxes fully, but enough. Beside it, the child smiled. Humanity hadn't won this conflict through superior strength or clever tactics. They had won through trust and by utterly refusing to use fear as a weapon, even when it was being used against them. Across the galaxy, younger species who had watched the entire affair and all learned a valuable lesson, and the old powers felt something they hadn't experienced in millennia: limits. They had found a line they could not cross. The dragon settled back among its familiar stars, vast and watchful as ever. The child remained beside it, a small, steady presence in the face of infinity. And the galaxy finally understood. Some forces in the universe cannot be taken. Some bonds cannot be separated. And humanity was far, far more dangerous when it refused to dominate. The galaxy changed quietly after that day. There was no grand announcement, no victory speech, no celebration echoing across the stars, but a profound calm settled over systems that once burned with conflict. Fleets returned to their home ports. Old enemies, for the first time in generations, lowered their weapons and stopped watching each other with such intense suspicion. Fear didn't just vanish into the void, it learned restraint. The dragon, that immense, ancient being, remained near human space. It wasn't a ruler or a conqueror, but simply a presence. It found a place to rest among distant, silent stars, where its colossal form no longer cast a shadow of dread over nearby worlds. When it moved, it did so with a slow, deliberate grace, always conscious of the fragile lives scattered around it. The child, the one who had started it all, returned to Earth. Billions watched that journey home. The dragon followed the human ships, but only halfway, stopping at the very edge of the solar system. It lowered its massive head one last time, close enough for the child to reach out and touch its shimmering scales again. The child pressed a small hand against that ancient, hardened surface. A single word, a whisper carried not by sound but by pure meaning, passed between them. Goodbye. The dragon felt it, understood it. For the first time in its impossibly long existence, the dragon let someone leave without a surge of loss or anger. It simply watched as the ships dwindled, shrinking until they vanished into streaks of light. And then, it waited. Humanity did not forget. The years passed, the child grew, and humanity began to reach out, not with demands, not with threats, but with quiet care. They sent unmanned stations into the dragon's territory. These weren't weapon platforms. They weren't prisons. They were more like homes, places of rest, sanctuaries of quiet observation. The dragon watched this with a careful, ancient eye. Trust was not an easy thing for a being so old, so accustomed to betrayal. But humans, it seemed, were patient. They always had been. Then, disaster struck distant systems. Stars grew unstable, threatening to go supernova. Whole worlds faced extinction from cosmic calamities. And the dragon moved. But this time, it was not alone. Human ships followed, not to command or control, but to coordinate. Together, they became a force of salvation. They stabilized stars, shielded planets, and saved countless lives. The galaxy witnessed this again and again. Where the dragon passed, destruction no longer followed. Relief did. Protection, balance. The dragon had become a guardian. Once more, not because it was commanded to, but because it chose to be. Many years later, the child returned, no longer small, but taller, older, still human, still gentle. The dragon sensed their approach long before the ship arrived. It lifted its head from its stellar rest, its ancient heart beating faster than it had in centuries. When the human stepped onto the observation platform, the dragon lowered itself. Just as it had done all those years ago, the very fabric of space seemed to grow calm in its presence. The human placed a hand on the very same scale they had touched as a child. The bond was still there, unbroken by time or distance. The galaxy watched, holding its collective breath. The human spoke, their voice steady and clear. "You don't have to be alone anymore." The dragon felt the profound truth in those words. For eons, it had believed its fate was to stand apart, to be feared, avoided, and remembered only in stories of warning. Humans had changed that, not with power, but with simple, unwavering presence. And so, the dragon shared its final choice with the galaxy. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a proclamation of fear. It was an offering of understanding. It would remain, not as a weapon of last resort, not as a forgotten king, but as a guardian of the space between worlds, a watcher, a reminder. In the eras that followed, wars became harder to start, not because of overwhelming force, but because everyone, every leader, every soldier, remembered the image of the dragon's eye and the human who stood unafraid beneath it. Children across the galaxy grew up hearing a new kind of story, not one of terror, but one of incredible courage. They learned that the deadliest being in the universe had been changed, not by fleets of warships, but by a child who chose to reach out instead of turning away. The dragon rested among the stars, a vast and placid silhouette against the nebulae. Human ships passed nearby without fear. The universe fell to balanced, and somewhere on Earth, the human who had once been a child would look up at the night sky, at the familiar constellations, knowing the dragon was still there, watching, guarding, choosing. The galaxy never froze in fear again, because it no longer feared what it did not understand. It remembered the exact moment everything changed, when a human child touched the deadliest dragon ever known, and in doing so, taught the entire universe how to be brave. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the far reaches of space. Until next time, stay curious.